Tonight was supposed to be our anniversary dinner.
Oh, honey, can we skip it this year? We're just chilling.
Ethan Hayes stepped inside the house with a soft smile tugging at his lips, clutching a small bouquet of her favorite lilies in one hand and a printed reservation slip in the other. It was supposed to be a night full of warmth. 7 years together, a quiet dinner, and maybe a stroll afterward. But the second he walked into the living room, his heart stuttered. Lena was curled on the sofa with Mason, her childhood best friend, legs tucked under her, a half-finished bottle of wine between them. Their laughter filled the room like a private joke he wasn't meant to hear. Ethan cleared his throat with a hopeful grin and reminded her gently that tonight was supposed to be their anniversary dinner. Lena blinked as if she genuinely forgot, then shrugged carelessly. "Oh, honey, can we skip it this year? We're just chilling." His smile faded, almost invisible, but the cut was sharp. Later, when Mason stepped into the guest bathroom, Lena tugged Ethan into the kitchen, speaking in a hushed voice as if she didn't want their guests to overhear. Yet she didn't look guilty. She looked calm. Too calm. She poured herself more wine and leaned against the counter, eyes unusually confident. Then she exhaled slowly and said, "Ethan, I want us to be modern and mature now." Ethan's brows knitted. Lena continued, her tone steady, rehearsed. "Mason means a lot to me. I don't want to hide it anymore. I want him to be part of our relationship." Ethan tried to laugh at first, thinking she was joking, but Lena's expression was unwavering. She added casually, almost academically, "Monogamy is outdated. We don't need to be trapped in old rules." The room felt colder. The house, once a home, suddenly became a stranger's territory. Ethan's breath grew tight, but he couldn't speak. Ethan didn't shout. He didn't cry. His body went still in a way that terrified even him. He stood there holding his wine glass, watching his own hand tremble as though it belonged to someone else. Everything Lena said echoed in the back of his skull, but the words no longer mattered. They just dissolved into a ringing numbness. Mason returned to the room, cheerful and oblivious, joking again, but Ethan didn't even look at him. Without a word, he pulled off his wedding ring, placed it gently on the counter beside the lilies, and stepped back. Lena blinked in confusion, reaching out slightly as if to stop him, but she couldn't find the words fast enough. Mason's smile finally faded when he saw Ethan's eyes, quiet, broken, done. Ethan opened the front door and walked out into the night, not slamming it, not furious, just gone. Ethan first met Lena during their sophomore year of college, a time when life felt like a series of endless possibilities. Lena's parents were in the throes of a bitter divorce, and the sudden financial strain left her struggling to pay tuition. Ethan noticed immediately, her usual confident aura replaced by quiet worry. Without a second thought, he offered help. Tutoring sessions, shared meals, late-night walks to calm her panic, and sometimes even covering small expenses when her part-time jobs weren't enough. He dreamed of moving to New York City for a promising music career, a chance to finally perform professionally, but when Lena hesitated to leave her family behind, Ethan quietly let go of his dream. He stayed in their hometown, taking odd jobs to make ends meet, prioritizing her stability above his ambitions. Lena repeatedly assured him Mason was just a brother, and Ethan, trusting her, never questioned it. After graduation, Ethan worked tirelessly, juggling 2 jobs to afford their first home, while Lena's corporate career slowly gained momentum. Evenings were quiet and mundane, bills, groceries, and occasional dinner at home. Ethan's love never wavered. He woke before dawn, returned after midnight, and still found time to ask about her day. Lena, ambitious and energetic, seemed to thrive in her office environment, climbing the ladder with determination. Mason remained a constant presence, coffee catch-ups, old friend reunions, but Lena's reassurance kept Ethan at ease. Their life appeared stable from the outside, a cozy home, shared routines, and mutual respect. Yet, the monotony began to weigh on Lena, her eyes drifting toward excitement beyond the predictable rhythm Ethan adored. Unaware of her growing restlessness, Ethan continued to sacrifice his comfort and time, believing their bond and shared history were unshakable. Recently, subtle changes began to nag at Ethan, but love clouded his judgment. Lena started locking her phone, muttering vague excuses where he glanced over her shoulder. She dressed up with extra effort for girls' nights out, claiming casual dinners with co-workers, while Mason's messages pinged relentlessly late into the night. Ethan noticed the occasional smirk, shared jokes he didn't fully understand, but he dismissed them, telling himself he was overthinking. The man who had given everything, time, security, loyalty, chose patience and trust over suspicion. Deep down, he knew something was off, yet the thought of doubting Lena wounded him more than betrayal itself. Every rational signal he overlooked, every instinct silenced by love, now set the stage for heartbreak. The audience sees a man caught between devotion and doubt, his sacrifice making the impending betrayal cut even deeper. Ethan sat in his parked car long after the engine had cooled, the city lights casting pale reflections across the windshield. His hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, but he didn't move. Tears streamed silently down his face, leaving trails on his cheeks he barely noticed. Memories of their college days, quiet sacrifices, and 7 years of marriage collided with the raw shock of betrayal. Every promise Lena had made echoed in the emptiness of the car, now feeling like a coffin of his own trust. He tried to imagine driving somewhere, anywhere, but his body refused. His thoughts swirled, anger, disbelief, sorrow, but words wouldn't form. Hours passed in heavy silence. The hum of distant traffic seemed mocking, indifferent. By the time his phone rang, he almost didn't want to answer. When it did, he heard the familiar, anxious voice of his sister, Haley, and something in him finally cracked. Haley's voice on the phone was warm but urgent, pulling Ethan out his haze. She could sense immediately that something was terribly wrong. After a short exchange, she offered her guest room, insisting he come over even if just for a few hours. When he arrived at her apartment, the familiar comfort of her home, soft lighting, cozy couch, faint scent of lavender, provided the first sense of safety he'd felt all evening. On her couch, Ethan finally let the dam break. Words tumbled out in trembling sentences. The shock of Lena's betrayal, the surreal conversation about Mason, the wedding ring he'd left behind. Haley listened quietly, occasionally reaching to hold his hand, offering reassurance without judgment. For the first time since walking out, Ethan allowed himself to grieve openly, the tension in his shoulders dissolving only slightly as he realized he wasn't completely alone in facing this emotional storm. While Ethan poured out his pain, his phone buzzed repeatedly, disrupting the fragile solace. Lena's messages appeared first, long, reasoned texts claiming he was overreacting, labeling him insecure, and insisting that healthy couples explore together. Each word twisted the knife, making him question his sanity and the reality he had known. Moments later, Mason's messages arrived, equally taunting. She deserves happiness. And you should learn to share instead of controlling her. Ethan's chest tightened as rage mixed with sorrow, his trembling fingers hovering over the screen. The couple who had laughed, loved, and built a life together had now weaponized words to provoke him. Finally, he blocked them both, Lena's carefully crafted justifications and Mason's cruel provocations. But the act didn't bring relief. It confirmed that the conflict had officially begun, setting in motion a chain of choices, confrontations, and heartbreak that would test everything Ethan once held sacred. Ethan finally summoned the courage to file for a trial separation, hoping the distance would bring clarity and protect his emotional well-being. Instead, Lena erupted. She spun the narrative instantly, telling friends, colleagues, and even extended family that Ethan had abandoned her over a simple question, painting him as controlling and unreasonable. Whispers followed him at work. Coworkers glanced with pity or suspicion, asking carefully phrased questions he couldn't answer. The constant barrage of judgment and rumors gnawed at him, affecting his concentration, productivity, and sleep. Every email felt heavier, every meeting a minefield. Despite his inner calm and rational reasoning, the emotional pressure was relentless. He leaned on Haley, who became his shield, deciphering the manipulation, correcting false stories quietly, and keeping his reputation intact. But even with her protection, the cracks in professional and personal life widened as Lena's deception amplified tension and isolation. Determined to gather his personal belongings, Ethan returned to the home he once loved, hoping the task would be simple. But the moment he stepped through the doorway, unease prickled at his skin. Mason's sneakers were carelessly near the front door, and 2 wine glasses, recently rinsed but still faintly scented, sat in the sink. On the bed, Mason's hoodie was folded casually, as if claiming territory. Ethan's heart sank in an unbearable thud. Betrayal hit him like a physical blow. The house, once a sanctuary of shared memories, now reeked of deceit and secrecy. He didn't linger, snatching only the essentials before walking out. Each step toward the car felt heavier than the last, the weight of love, trust, and years of effort collapsing inside him. He realized this was not a temporary lapse, but a deep fracture in the life he had painstakingly built. Seeking legal guidance, Ethan met with his divorce lawyer, a stern yet empathetic figure who didn't sugarcoat the reality. The lawyer warned him that Lena, in her emotional volatility and apparent vindictiveness, could attempt to seize assets or complicate settlements purely out of spite. The idea made Ethan's stomach churn. Even with the law on his side, the potential for prolonged conflict loomed like a storm cloud. That evening, Lena's messages appeared on his phone, veiled threats, calculated provocations, and promises that she would ruin him if he pushed forward. Each text struck with the sharp precision of someone familiar with his vulnerabilities. Ethan's pulse quickened, anger and fear blending into a raw, simmering cocktail of emotion. Yet he felt a strange clarity, too, a recognition that the fight would be grueling, but necessary. The battle lines were drawn, not just legally, but emotionally, mentally, and morally. The courtroom was charged with tension, the air thick as Ethan and Lena faced each other across the judge's bench. Lena, composed yet sharp, launched her attack, painting Ethan as emotionally abusive and mentally unstable, weaving carefully crafted narratives designed to sway the jury and judge. Each word struck like a calculated dagger, and Ethan's heart sank as murmurs rippled through the room. He remained stoic, fighting to maintain control over his emotions, while his attorney prepared rebuttals. Lena's performance, confident and rehearsed, aimed to make Ethan appear irrational, unpredictable, and unworthy. For a moment, the room seemed to teeter on her narrative, until Haley, seated quietly beside Ethan, rose with calm authority and requested permission to submit evidence. The judge, intrigued, leaned forward, signaling potential for a dramatic shift. Ethan's pulse quickened. He knew this could be the turning point that revealed the truth hidden beneath years of manipulation. The room fell into stunned silence as Haley handed over a USB and explained the evidence, secretly recorded clips from Lena's recent girls' night out. The video played on the courtroom screen, showing Mason, tipsy and overconfident, confessing directly, "I convinced her to ask Ethan. I told her we could finally get her house and money if he refused," and stormed out. Every eye widened, jaws dropping, including Lena's. Her carefully constructed web of lies unraveled in seconds. The manipulation, once hidden behind charm and rhetoric, lay bare before the court. Ethan felt a mixture of vindication and shock, relief mingling with lingering hurt. The jury leaned in, absorbing every word, every expression. Whispers buzzed through the room as Lena's face turned pale, her eyes darting to Mason with disbelief and fury. For the first time, the audience in the courtroom witnessed the hidden strategy behind her calculated betrayal, exposed with crystal clarity. The courtroom held its collective breath as the judge reviewed the evidence and listened to final arguments. Lena's confident facade crumbled completely. Her voice wavered as she tried feeble defenses, but the video evidence and Mason's intoxicated confession left no room for doubt. The judge, deliberate and authoritative, ruled overwhelmingly in Ethan's favor, granting the majority of the assets, dismissing Lena's accusations of abuse, and officially recognizing her manipulation. Relief, exhaustion, and a quiet triumph washed over Ethan, the weight of months of emotional turmoil finally lifting. Haley squeezed his hand in silent solidarity, a small smile confirming the truth had prevailed. Lena, humiliated and defeated, sank into her seat, realizing the depth of her miscalculations. Outside the courtroom, whispers of the scandal spread rapidly, and Ethan felt the first true sense of freedom and closure since the betrayal began, a vindication of love, loyalty, and unwavering integrity. After the courtroom victory, Ethan made a conscious decision to sever all ties with Lena and Mason, knowing that true closure required distance. He moved forward, returning to his first love, music, a passion long deferred for the sake of stability and sacrifice. With Haley's support, he set up a small, cozy studio in his home, filling the space with instruments, recording equipment, and the vibrant energy of creativity. Late nights were no longer silent battles with anxiety, but hours spent composing melodies that reflected his emotions and inner journey. Each note became a release, a reclaiming of his identity that had been overshadowed by betrayal and compromise. Friends and colleagues began to notice the spark returning to Ethan, the quiet confidence in his posture, the subtle joy in his eyes. Music was no longer a dream deferred. It was his healing, his empowerment, and his new beginning. Recognizing the deep emotional scars left by betrayal and manipulation, Ethan sought additional support by joining groups for men recovering from emotional abuse. Sharing his story and listening to others brought a sense of solidarity he had long missed. For the first time, he realized his experiences were valid and his feelings legitimate, removing the lingering self-blame that had shadowed his life. Weekly meetings became a sanctuary, a place where vulnerability was met with understanding, not judgment. Slowly, Ethan's confidence rebuilt itself, not through external validation, but through acknowledgement of his strength, resilience, and capacity to heal. With each conversation, each shared anecdote, he became more in tune with his emotional needs and boundaries. Friends, family, and even new acquaintances began noticing the shift. Ethan was no longer a man trapped by others' expectations, but someone reclaiming autonomy and pride in his identity. Over time, Ethan reflected on the root of the heartbreak and betrayal. He realized it wasn't his reliability or stability that had failed, but Lena's insatiable need for external validation, a craving for excitement and recognition rather than love and partnership. This understanding liberated him from lingering self-doubt and guilt. For the first time in years, he slept peacefully, untroubled by anxiety, suspicion, or resentment. His mornings were calm, filled with the soft hum of music or fresh coffee brewing, moments of mindfulness replacing the former chaos of betrayal. Ethan's life, once defined by compromise and sacrifice, now centered on self-respect, creativity, and emotional well-being. He looked forward with optimism, embracing opportunities that aligned with his passions and values. In shedding the past, he didn't just survive. He thrived, empowered by lessons learned and the knowledge that his worth was never contingent on someone else's approval. A year had passed, and Ethan now sat comfortably in a quaint coffee shop, the familiar scent of roasted beans blending with soft background music. He laughed easily with Haley and a few new friends. The weight of past betrayal lifted from his shoulders. On the corner table, he signed an autograph for a young fan, a quiet acknowledgement of his growing music career. The cozy studio he had built with Haley's help had blossomed into small but meaningful success, allowing him to create freely without compromise. The sunlight streaming through the large windows highlighted his calm confidence, a far cry from the broken, uncertain man of the previous year. Every note he played, every smile shared, reflected a man who had reclaimed his identity, rebuilt his emotional foundation, and embraced a life fueled by passion and self-respect. Through the glass window of the cafe, Lena appeared, a shadow of her former confidence. She was thin, her posture slightly slumped, and her eyes carried the weight of regret accumulated over months of reflection. Mason was nowhere in sight. She stood alone, a stark contrast to the vibrant life Ethan now inhabited. She watched quietly as he laughed naturally with Haley and new companions, immersed in conversations and joy she could no longer touch. Every gesture, every carefree smile reminded her of the world she had abandoned through manipulation and selfishness. Despite the sting of realization, there was no confrontation, no dramatic gesture, just observation. The subtle tension in her chest mirrored the finality of consequences long delayed. Ethan's happiness, genuine and unforced, was a silent rebuke, though it was not meant to punish. Lena's presence was a quiet acknowledgement that some doors, once closed, could never reopen. Their eyes met briefly through the glass, a fleeting, weightless moment charged with unspoken understanding. There was no anger, no lingering hatred, only the calm clarity of closure. Ethan smiled gently, a smile not for reconciliation, but as an emblem of self-forgiveness, a release of the doubt and pain that had haunted him for so long. Lena's expression shifted as she recognized the finality of her loss, a mix of longing and acknowledgement of her mistakes. Ethan turned away, pushing open the cafe doors, stepping into the warm sunlight that spilled onto the bustling street. Each step carried him forward, away from betrayal, and toward freedom, confidence, and self-empowerment. The city seemed alive with possibilities, a reflection of his reborn spirit. In that quiet act of moving forward, he had completed his journey, from heartbreak and manipulation to liberation, peace, and a life defined on his own terms.